So after a difficult year of gender-based violence in South Africa, 10 female authors sharing their unique experiences bring you a book called The Perils of Patriarchy. The book tackles different social issues, but it aims to bring understanding to the battle of ending gender inequality. Now, to chat about this, I'm joined in studio by authors Candace Chirwa, Tanaka Nazare, Yasar Musa, and Nokwanda Mpama. Good morning, ladies. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So, we saw the wrap-up of 16 days of activism. Many people, continually saying that this is 365 and a quarter, as you mentioned, Tanaka. But a lot of people dissatisfied with, the actions, the stances, and also where to from here. So in light of this, what inspired the book? How did 10 authors get together and compile this book?
So what inspired the book was, I think, just the frustration of women having to constantly explain themselves whenever there was a gender-based violence scenario. And so I just felt that it was time for us to just have a tool that would be a book to say, okay, if you don't understand it, then read about it. Instead of just always constantly having to use our energy and exhaust ourselves to explain to people that just really weren't willing to engage, we just decided to write a book about our perils of patriarchy.
Coming together, finding the right stories to put into the book and also the correct authors. What was that sifting process like, and how did you eventually come up with the 10 authors that you did?
I think it was a process of really through friendship and really understanding and listening to the stories that most of these women have gone through, and really allowing them to be brave and courageous to write these stories onto paper, and then just being inspired by it and saying, I think we need to empower other people that have probably gone through the same, but just don't have the voice. It's just the process of being empowered by all of their stories and just saying, you know what, I think other people need to listen, and it's time that action needs to be done as well. Yeah.
Okay, so before we rope you in, I'm just going to ask Candace. I mean, you were part of editing the book as well, so it was quite a heavy and weighty narrative and content that you had to deal with. So what was that process like for you? How did you also manage to, what's the word, debrief or let go as well and not be caught up in it? I mean, we know this is an issue that continues to plague South Africans and the world over, in fact.
I think for me, I'm really good at having the switch where I can be an academic, so I can be objective, but then dealing with such an important issue like this, it was very hard because you found new information and something about, your Yasar was going through something and you're like, wow, I didn't know this. We've been friends for 5 years and it's new information. But in terms of editing, you always have to sort of be objective and just know that, okay, the goal is to make sure that there are no grammar errors and that it flows structurally. It was a heavy task, but I think at the end of the day, what I wanted to achieve was to have an unconventional style of having 10 different short stories in a book and not have it to be, conventional and make it different. So the structure wouldn't be the same from my experience to Yasar's experience to Tanaka's experience. There'll be different formatting structures that had to be followed. But it was a fun journey. Tiresome, but fulfilling. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely a conversation starter that will hopefully take the conversation to another level as the year culminates and we enter 2020. So, Nokwanda, I'm going to rope you in here. I mean, we saw the men are trash social media trending topic that had, circulated on Instagram and Twitter. That was something you chose to deal with in particular. Why did you particularly resonate with that issue, and what do you put forth in your story?
I decided to write about that briefly because I was seeing on my Facebook, because I don't have Instagram or Twitter because I'm an old lady.
Wow.
So on my Facebook feed, I would see a lot of men quite aggrieved by being called trash and being very offended, and the resounding question was, is your father trash? Whenever they would have this hashtag put in front of them. But what kind of intrigued me was the fact that there were more men upset about being called trash than the fact that there are scores of women being violently abused and murdered all over the country. So I think the hashtag had the purpose of really putting a mirror at men to see how their response would be, and a lot of them didn't really respond well. They didn't come to the table and they didn't come to discuss what was really the issue. They were more aggrieved about being insulted.
And it's a valid point because, you know, the mindset had to shift. And I think getting to that root still hasn't permeated society. I mean, people are still victims, both men and women. So definitely that conversation continues. But I'm going to rope in Yasir. You spoke about feminism, what it means to be a feminist in South Africa. How was that element of the story crucial to unpacking the perils of patriarchy at large?
I think for me, like feminism and patriarchy go hand in hand. I think patriarchy is the problem and feminism is sort of the tool to kind of combat that. So I think it's important to unpack that and discuss it. And look, for me, the most important thing about feminism is the equality part of it. I think everyone always says, oh, women want to be treated specially, women want to be placed on a pedestal, and that's not the case. Women just want equal rights and equal access as men have. And I think that's an important part in dismantling patriarchy.
Do you think becoming unapologetically feminist has become more acceptable in society? Or do you think women are still bearing the brunt of daring to show up and demand what they rightfully deserve?
I think it's a combination of both. I think today, compared to 100 years ago, women have a lot more rights, and that kind of shows that women are taking a stance and being more daring and taking what they want. But at the same time, women are still kind of in the shadows. But I think if you look at how women approach things today, there's a lot more strength and power. And I think that's always a step. Rome wasn't built in a day, so women are making big strides in showing their faces.
I'm looking at the issue of gender fluidity and how redefining what gender is all about has obviously come to the forefront with the LGBTQIA+, if I got that correctly. I mean, how is that factored into your story? Or was that an issue that you decided to consider, or is that another topic in the book?
Look, it's something I did consider, but I don't think it's something I heavily touched on.
Okay.
My chapter does look at equality for all, so that includes everyone in the queer community, and I try to be as inclusive as possible because everyone's fighting for rights, whether it's women or queer people. It's an issue that everyone faces.
Tanaka, I'm going to rope you in. I mean, your focus area was about challenges that women face, perhaps in the NGO space. So, I mean, I know that there's a lot of talk and writings about corporate, corporate cultures and sort of how that patriarchy permeates in that space. How would you paint the picture of NGOs in particular?
To be very honest, I don't think it's that much different from corporate. It's well hidden, but it's not that much different. And I think it actually has much more an impact because we are tasked with doing work that is fighting inequality, working with people that are quite vulnerable, working with people that are trying to fight for their rights. And the fact that we have people in the corridors who pretty much are perpetuating corporate culture and patriarchy, it is actually quite violent to the people that we should be working for. And you can see it in how women are treated in the NGO sector. If you look at the stats in terms of pay gap, for example, before we even go to people that we work for, within the corridors, women of color, we're still fighting for our rights within the NGO sector. And as a foreigner as well, I feel it quite acutely because you think that's a safe space as well, but it's not. Women within the queer community have it harder as well. And I think it was important for me to discuss this because as much as I can talk about other things in life, we spend about 8 hours minimum at work, and that is our lives. And too often we like to pretend like women have it great at work now, and we really don't.
I'm looking at another issue that we've transport in South Africa. It's quite an experience for a woman who has to, not only be the breadwinner, but also put up with treatment and abuse of power in that sense. Candice, I'm going to rope you in and ask you those dynamics that exist, how we continue to not address it, in fact, and perpetuate that narrative within that space.
I think for me, what was very important in my chapter was really just trying to show the nuances and the struggles that women go through in terms of just getting from point A to point B. For a woman to leave point A, she has to inform everyone that where she's going, what time she's going to be back, perhaps share her live location, carry pepper spray on her. And for men, it's just as easy as, okay, I'm going to leave and then come back the next day with no consequences. And I think in my chapter, what was very hard for me is to relive the trauma that I went through of almost being assaulted in an Uber and having to really just show the narrative that it's not our fault, because there was nothing wrong with the way I was dressing, there was nothing wrong with the way I was sitting, but it's just, you know, a man was feeling entitled to my body. And so what I was trying to perpetuate in that chapter was to say that it's not our fault, it's actually just perpetuators' fault, and we need to rechange that narrative, we need to shift that narrative so that we can feel safe to travel. Because travel should be free. It shouldn't be a thing of, I always have to go through so many constraints and limits and so many protections just to be able to get to point B. It's a lot. Yeah.
How do we contact you all? Does the book have its own social media? Do you all have your own social media apart from Nokwanda?
Yeah.
I have Facebook.
Oh, okay. So let's go around. How do we contact each of you and find out more?
So for the book, it's at Patriarchy Pop on Twitter and Perils of Patriarchy on Facebook and Twitter.
Okay. Your individual social media handles?
Mine is Candice_Chirwa on Twitter and Instagram.
And where do we purchase the book?
On our website, www.perilsofpatriarchy.com.
Independent publishing.
Yes,
That's the way. Yes, sir. How do we contact you?
For me, it's Yasar21 for both Instagram and Twitter.
All right. Nokwanda, Facebook?
Wanda Mbama on Facebook.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And you, Tanaka?
So I only have Instagram. It's Tanaka_NZR.
All right. Ladies, thank you for continuing this conversation. As you did mention, strides have been taken. We were chatting offline as well. Strides have been taken. We need to salute those strides that have been taken, but also realize that there's a lot more that needs to be done. Thank you for playing your part. And thank you for this conversation starter, and all the best with your future endeavors. I mean, 2020 is a few days away. Hopefully this can be part of the victories that we experience for women at large.
Thank you.
There you have it, the Perils of Patriarchy. Thank you to Candice Chirwa, Tanaka Nazare, Yasir Musa, and of course Nokwanda Mpama. They joined us here in studio to chat about their latest endeavor.